"Sweetheart, use mom's card. She's got $130,000 saved." My son said, handing her my card without my permission. She raced to the mall, filled her cart with expensive stuff. The bill was $82,000. She swiped my card. The cashier looked up and said, "Sorry, but this card is—" I never thought my own son would see me as nothing more than an open wallet. All my life, I'd worked hard to give him everything: the best schools, a comfortable home, a future I never had. But as they say sometimes, kindness is taken for weakness. It all started one quiet Sunday morning. I was in the kitchen, baking cinnamon rolls, when I overheard his voice from the living room. "Sweetheart, use mom's card. She's got about $130,000 saved." He said it so casually, as if he was offering candy, not my entire life's savings. For a moment, I froze. Did I just hear that right? I peeked around the corner, and there he was, standing beside his wife, smiling. He handed her my credit card like it was his. I had given it to him once, months ago, for an emergency. I trusted him to do the right thing. I didn't expect this. She took the card with a grin that made my stomach twist. "Oh, thank you, babe. Finally, we can shop properly," she said. I saw her pick up her phone, whispering about luxury handbags, imported perfumes, and the good life she deserved. I stayed silent. I wanted to see how far they would go. That afternoon, I got a text alert, a purchase, $4,500 at a jewelry store. Then another, $2,100 at a boutique. By the time the fifth alert came through, I stopped counting. My hands trembled, but I didn't cancel the card. Not yet. You see, I've learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't instant, it's patient. The next day, my son came home all smiles. "Mom, I'll be out for a few hours." "Just running some errands," he said. He kissed my cheek, a gesture that used to feel warm. Now, it burned. After they left, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. $82,000 gone in less than 24 hours. I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. It wasn't just about the money. It was betrayal. My own flesh and blood, stealing from me behind my back. But instead of crying, I started smiling because I knew something they didn't. A few years ago, after a bad experience with identity theft, I had created 2 bank accounts, one real and one mirrored, a decoy account connected to a prepaid credit card. That $130,000 they thought I had? It wasn't real. The card was linked to the dummy account, empty, useless, and designed for protection. Every time they swiped, they were being tracked. Every store, every purchase, every location. By that evening, they were at the mall. My son's wife, her name is Rebecca, had filled a cart with electronics, clothes, shoes, perfumes, all luxury. She strutted to the cashier like she owned the place. Watched through the live transaction tracker as the total climbed higher and higher, $82,000. She swiped my card, the terminal. Blinked, then again, and again. Finally, the cashier frowned. "Sorry, but this card is declined." Rebecca's expression must have been priceless. She called my son in a panic. I could almost hear her voice trembling. "It's not working." The cashier says there's no balance. And my son, oh, my poor foolish boy, told her to try again, as if money would magically appear out of thin air. Meanwhile, I was at home, sipping tea, watching the notifications pile up. Transaction declined. Transaction declined. Transaction declined. They returned home late that night, furious, embarrassed, and quiet. When they walked through the door, I pretended nothing had happened. "How was your day?" I asked, smiling sweetly. Rebecca didn't answer. My son avoided my gaze, and that's when I knew. They were caught. And they knew it. I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then I said, "Oh, by the way, I called the bank today. They told me someone tried using my old emergency card." Rebecca's face turned white. My son swallowed hard. Must have been some kind of mistake, he stammered. I just smiled. Yes, I said softly. A terrible mistake indeed. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, they thought they could steal from me. But they have no idea what's coming next, because this was only the beginning. They wanted my money. Now, they were going to pay, in ways they could never imagine. Part 2. The aftermathy woke up the next morning with an odd calm inside me, the kind that comes after the storm but before the reckoning. The house was unusually quiet. My son and Rebecca didn't come down for breakfast. Normally, Rebecca would float into the kitchen demanding her almond milk latte, and my son would follow, pretending everything was normal. But today, silence spoke louder than words. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the dining table, and scrolled through the transaction history again. $82,000 in failed charges. I should have been angry, but all I felt was cold clarity. When people show you who they are, believe them. And my son had just shown me who he really was. A man raised by love, but ruled by greed. Around noon, I heard their door open. Rebecca appeared first. Her hair messy, eyes puffy, she glanced at me briefly, then looked away. My son followed, his voice soft. Mom, we need to talk. I nodded, gesturing toward the chairs. Of course, dear, sit. He hesitated before speaking. There was some misunderstanding with your card yesterday. I smiled faintly. A misunderstanding? Yes, he said quickly. I thought it was fine to use it since, well, you've always helped us. But it got declined and we were embarrassed. Rebecca crossed her arms. The cashier thought we were scammers. Do you know how humiliating that was? I set my cup down slowly, letting the silence stretch before I spoke. You handed my card to your wife without asking. You spent nearly $100,000 on things you didn't earn. And now you're embarrassed? My tone was calm, dangerously calm. Rebecca scoffed. It's not that serious. You're not poor, are you? My son flinched. Rebecca! But it was too late. Something in me snapped, not in anger but in realization. This wasn't just disrespect. It was entitlement, the kind that festers when you give too much, for too long. I leaned back, folded my hands and said softly, from this moment on, neither of you will ever touch a cent of my money again. Rebecca's eyes widened. You can't be serious. We're family. Exactly, I said, standing up. And family doesn't steal. My son tried to reason. Mom, please, she didn't mean... But I cut him off. You did. You both did. I turned and walked away, leaving them speechless. In that moment, I decided, if they could betray me once, they could do it again. I needed to teach them a lesson that money couldn't buy. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Mr. Green. He'd been with me since my husband's passing. A sharp man with kind eyes. Mrs. Ellis, he said. What can I do for you? I explained everything. The theft attempt, the fake account, the humiliation I'd watched unfold. He listened quietly, then said, Would you like to press charges? I hesitated. Not yet, I said. First, I want them to feel it. He chuckled. You've got something in mind, don't you? Oh, I do, I replied. But I'll need your help. Over the next week, I began my quiet revenge. I started by calling the bank to freeze the secondary card my son used for emergencies. Then, I transferred my real savings, all $130,000, into a new trust account under my name only, locked behind dual authorization. If they tried anything again, it would lead nowhere. Next, I made a few changes around the house. The car they used, my car, technically, was under my name. I had the registration updated, the keys replaced. When my son came out the next morning and found the car gone, he stormed inside. Mom, where's the SUV? In the shop, I said with a smirk. He looked confused. For how long? Indefinitely, Rebecca glared at me. You're being ridiculous, I smiled sweetly. No, darling. I'm being responsible. They didn't know it yet. But I was slowly taking back everything they'd leached from me. 2 days later, Rebecca's voice echoed through the hall. Your mother canceled my credit card. I peeked into the living room. She was holding her phone, tears of anger in her eyes. My son rubbed his temples. Just calm down, we'll fix this. I couldn't resist. You mean you'll steal again? I asked from the doorway. Her head snapped toward me. You're cruel! We needed that money. I tilted my head. For groceries? Or another shopping spree? She fell silent. Then I said something that made her jaw drop. You should get a job, Rebecca. Her face twisted in disbelief. A job? You expect me to work? Yes, I said calmly. That's what adults do. My son tried to intervene, but I raised my hand. Enough. You both have taken advantage of me for too long. This ends now? That night I overheard them arguing in their room. She's turning against us, Rebecca hissed. She's your mother, Ethan. Do something. I smiled to myself. Yes, do something. Let's see what you come up with next. The next morning my son came downstairs trying to act polite. Mom, he said, Rebecca and I were thinking of moving out for a while. I nodded. That's probably for the best. He blinked, surprised. You're not going to stop us? Why would I said. You're adults now. Time to live your own lives. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, I saw hesitation, maybe even fear. He realized I wasn't the soft, forgiving mother anymore. I was someone else now, someone who had nothing left to lose. After they left, the house felt lighter. I walked through the quiet rooms, the echo of my footsteps soothing. For years, I had carried their weight, their debts, their entitlement, their drama. Now, I was free. But freedom comes with echoes, and one of those echoes came a week later, in the form of a letter. It was from the bank, a notice of an attempted wire transfer from my old account. Someone had tried to access it at 2:47 a.m. using Ethan's credentials. I stared at the paper, my jaw tightening. So that's how it was going to be. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. That night I called Mr. Green again. I think it's time, I said. He sighed. You want to go legal? Not yet, I replied. First, I want to see how far they'll fall. He chuckled. You have a dangerous patience, Mrs. Ellis. I learned it from raising him, I said bitterly. I began tracking their movements again. Rebecca had sold her designer handbags online. My son had started borrowing money from friends. They were spiraling, slowly, but surely. One night I got a call. It was Ethan. His voice was trembling. Mom, we're behind on rent. Could you please help us out? Just a small loan. I swear I'll pay you back. I listened quietly. The same man who'd handed my card to his wife without a thought was now begging me for a few $100s. Karma was punctual this time. I took a breath and said, Of course, dear. Come by tomorrow. I'll have something for you. His relief was palpable. Thank you, Mom. You're the best. I smiled. But not out of kindness. Tomorrow. He'd get exactly what he deserved, because this wasn't about money anymore. This was about respect, and a lesson that would cost them far more than dollars. The next morning, I prepared an envelope. Inside it, I placed a single check. When Ethan and Rebecca arrived, I greeted them warmly, as if nothing had ever happened. Rebecca's eyes darted around the room, searching for signs of sympathy. There were none. I handed Ethan the envelope. He opened it eagerly, expecting salvation. Then his face fell. Inside wasn't a check for money. It was a printed copy of his attempted wire transfer, proof of his crime. Rebecca gasped. What is this? I stood tall. Evidence, I said. I could have sent this to the police, but I didn't yet. Ethan's face went pale. Mom, please. Stop calling me that, I snapped. You stopped being my son the moment you decided I was just a balance to drain. Rebecca reached for his arm. Trembling, what do you want from us? I looked her dead in the eye. I want you to learn the value of honesty, of earning your own peace, because without it, you'll never have anything, no matter how much you steal." They left in silence, and for the first time, I felt peace. Real peace. The kind that comes not from revenge, but from closure. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Rebecca wasn't the type to back down quietly, and I had a feeling she was about to make one last, desperate move, one that would change everything. This war wasn't about money anymore. It was about pride, and I was ready for the final round. The days after that confrontation were strangely peaceful. I'd wake up, make my coffee, water the plants, and enjoy the silence. No arguments echoing through the hallway, no guilt when my own son treated me like a burden, just the sound of the clock ticking, steady and calm, like a countdown to something inevitable. But peace never lasts when pride is wounded, especially Rebecca's. It started with small things. Blocked, calls from unknown numbers, strange emails telling me my bank details had been compromised, attempts to access my online accounts, all of which were stopped, thanks to Mr. Green's advice and the new security systems I'd set up. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, until one morning, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. "You think you're clever, don't you?" I stared at the screen, my hand trembling slightly. I didn't need to ask who it was. Rebecca. She wasn't going to let go easily. That afternoon, I called Mr. Green again. "Looks like she's still playing games," I said. He sighed. "Do you want me to involve the police this time?" "Not yet," I replied. "I want her to think she's winning first, because revenge tastes best when it's served slow and precise." The next few days, I acted as if nothing was wrong. I went about my daily routines, smiling at neighbors, baking pies for the local charity drive. But behind the calm exterior, I was preparing my final trap. A trap that wouldn't just teach them a lesson. It would end their games once and for. All step one was bait. I created a new email under my name, one that looked like an old backup account I'd forgotten. Then, I set up a fake online banking link through Mr. Green's tech team. It looked real enough to fool anyone desperate for a second chance. Step 2 was patience. I waited, and sure enough, on the third night, someone tried to log into that fake account. I watched from my laptop as the IP address pinged from the same town my son and Rebecca had moved to. They were using her phone. Rebecca had taken the bait. The fake account showed 90,000 available balance every time she tried to move it. A tracking alert went straight to me and my lawyer. By morning, we had everything we needed: timestamps, login history, even her location. Mr. Green smiled when he saw the report. "That's enough for fraud charges, Mrs. Ellis." I nodded. "Good, but I'm not pressing them yet. Let's make this personal." That evening, I called my son. "Ethan," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I think we should talk." He sounded hesitant. "About what?" "About family," I replied. "And trust." There was silence. Then he sighed. "All right, Mom. We'll come by tomorrow." When they arrived, Rebecca looked cautious but defiant. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, guilt written all over his face. I led them to the living room, the same place where this all began. "I wanted to show you something," I said, turning the laptop toward them. On the screen was the login attempt, Rebecca's email. Time-stamped, location visible, her face drained of color. "What is this?" she asked, her voice cracking. "It's you," I said calmly, "trying to steal from me again." Ethan turned to her, shocked. "Rebecca, don't you dare!" she shouted. "She's framing me." I leaned back. "Oh, sweetheart, if I were framing you, I wouldn't have the screenshots of your messages." I clicked another folder. Her texts to a friend appeared on the screen. "She's old. She won't know. I'll get the money back one way or another." Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You did this? After everything?" Rebecca stood up, trembling with rage. "She's manipulating you. Can't you see? She's turning you against me. But Ethan didn't respond. He just buried his face in his hands. I looked at her, steady and calm. Rebecca, I could call the police right now, but I'm giving you one last chance. Leave this house. Leave my son. And don't ever come near me again. She laughed bitterly. You think you can threaten me? No, I said, standing up slowly. I don't threaten. I end things. What happened next was chaos. Rebecca lunged toward me, screaming something I couldn't even process. Ethan jumped up to hold her back, shouting, "Stop it, Rebecca! Just stop!" But she shoved him away. You're both pathetic, she yelled. Fine! Keep your stupid money! She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Ethan stood there, breathing heavily, tears in his eyes. He looked at me like a child again, lost, ashamed. Mom, I didn't know she'd do this. I swear, I believed him. For once, I really did. I walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. Son, I said softly, sometimes love blinds us, but blindness isn't permanent. Now you have a choice. Stay blind or open your eyes. He nodded, silent tears falling. Then he left too, chasing after her. And for the first time, I didn't stop him. Some lessons I knew had to be learned the hard way. Weeks passed. I didn't hear from either of them, but news travels fast in small towns. One afternoon, while reading on my porch, a neighbor mentioned something casually. Did you hear? That young couple who rented the apartment near the lake got evicted. Couldn't pay rent. The wife left town last week. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Rebecca was gone, and Ethan. Maybe now he'd finally see the truth. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, trembling pen strokes, stained with what looked like tears. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to say I'm sorry. Rebecca left me. I lost my job. I lost everything. But maybe that's what I needed. If you'll let me, I'd like to come home, not for money, but for peace. I sat there for a long time, reading it over and over. Then I folded the letter, placed it in my drawer and whispered, maybe someday. 2 weeks later, I saw Ethan again. He looked thinner, older, humbled. He didn't ask for money. He didn't even ask for forgiveness. He just said, "Thank you for letting me come back, Mom." And for the first time in months, I hugged him, not out of pity, but out of hope. That night, I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor, thinking about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the revenge, the silence that followed. It all led to this, a quiet house, and a heart that finally felt at peace. People think revenge is about getting even, but it's not. It's about finding balance, and I had finally found mine. As for Rebecca, I heard she tried to start over in another city, but her past caught up with her. Fraud charges, unpaid debts, lies she couldn't outrun. Maybe she learned her lesson, maybe not. But that was no longer my burden to carry. I looked out at the night sky and smiled. Sometimes, justice doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes, it's as simple as letting karma do what it does best, quietly, relentlessly and perfectly timed. I whispered to myself one last time. They thought I was weak, but they forgot. I taught them everything they know. And with that, I closed the window, turned off the light, and walked away from the past for good. Months passed after Rebecca's departure, and for the first time in years, my house felt like a home again. No tension in the air. No footsteps sneaking around at midnight. Just peace. Fragile, precious peace. But peace, I've learned, is like glass. It looks beautiful, but one wrong move, one sharp memory, and it cracks. Ethan had moved into the guest room temporarily. He kept mostly to himself, quietly fixing things around the house that had been broken for years. The leaky faucet, the squeaky door, the old garden fence. He never asked for anything, and maybe that's what hurt the most. He was trying to atone. Silently, every morning, I'd see him sitting at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee, staring out the window. Sometimes, I'd catch him glancing at me like he wanted to speak, but he never did. So, I waited, because some apologies don't need to be spoken. They just need to be lived. One evening, I walked into the living room and found him looking through old photo albums. He froze, embarrassed, but I smiled. "Find something interesting?" He shrugged. "Just memories." I sat beside him. There was a photo of him as a boy holding his first bicycle, grinning from ear to ear. "You wanted to ride before you even learned how to balance," I said, chuckling softly. He smiled faintly. "You never let go of the seat, did you?" I shook my head. "I did. You just didn't notice." Silence settled again, heavy but not cold this time. Finally he spoke. "Mom, I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I just want you to know I'm not that person anymore." I looked at him carefully, trying to see the truth behind his words. He wasn't lying. He looked broken, but rebuilding. "I believe you," I said quietly. His eyes widened a little. "You do?" "I do," I replied. "Because I've been that person too. The one who forgets what really matters." He lowered his gaze, tears forming. "I should have protected you, not used you." I placed my hand over his. "Then start protecting yourself. That's how you protect me now." A few weeks later, Ethan got a job. It wasn't glamorous, just part-time work at a hardware store. But it was honest. Every day, he came home tired, hands covered in dust and paint, but his eyes looked clearer than ever. I could see the boy I once knew, the one who used to run home from school with scraped knees and wild dreams. He began paying me rent, even though I never asked for it, just a small envelope every month, placed neatly on the counter. At first, I tried to give it back. He refused. "It's not about the money, Mom," he said. "It's about responsibility." And for the first time, I realized he finally understood what I had been trying to teach all along. Then, one morning I received a letter. Not for me, but for him. The handwriting was unmistakable. Rebecca. I debated throwing it away. Part of me didn't want him to see it, to reopen that wound. But another part knew that healing doesn't come from avoiding the past. It comes from facing it. So, when Ethan came home that evening, I handed him the envelope. He stared at it for a long moment, then sighed. "She wrote again?" I nodded. "You don't have to read it." But he did. He sat quietly on the couch, eyes scanning the letter. Then, slowly, his shoulders slumped. When he finished, he handed it to me without a word. I hesitated before reading. "Ethan, I know I hurt you, and I know I'll never fix it. I lost everything, because I didn't know how to love what I had. You were good to me, even when I didn't deserve it. Tell your mother she was right about me. I'm leaving the country for a while. Don't try to find me. I hope you both can forgive me someday." When I looked up, Ethan's eyes were red. "She's gone for good," he said softly. I folded the letter and placed it in his hand, then let her go. You don't owe the past anything. In the months that followed, something remarkable happened. The house that once echoed with resentment began to feel alive again. Ethan planted flowers in the backyard, roses, marigolds and daffodils. He said they reminded him of Dad's old garden. Every morning, I'd watch him from the kitchen window, humming quietly while tending to the soil. It was as if he was rebuilding himself, petal by petal. But life has a way of testing us right when we think we've healed. One evening, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there. "Mrs. Ellis?" One asked. "Yes." "We're investigating a series of fraudulent charges connected to a woman named Rebecca Hayes. We believe she might have used your identity in recent transactions." My heart sank. "She's still doing this?" "Afraid so," the officer said. "We just need your statement." Ethan came into the room, his face pale. He listened silently as I explained what had happened. The fake account, the earlier thefts. Everything. When the officers left, he stood there, shaking his head. She's dragging you down even after she's gone. I put a hand on his shoulder. No, son. She's dragging herself down. We're done carrying her weight. That night, Ethan sat outside on the porch. I joined him, and we watched the stars in silence. He finally spoke, his voice trembling slightly. You know what hurts the most, Mom? That I almost became her. That greed, that blindness. I saw it in myself. I looked at him gently. The difference is, you stopped before it was too late. He turned to me. Why didn't you just give up on me? Because you're my son, I said softly. And a mother doesn't give up. She waits until her child finds his way back. He nodded slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. Then he whispered, I'm back now, and I believed him. Over time, our lives began to feel normal again. Simple dinners, quiet mornings, shared laughter over burnt toast and bad coffee. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Ethan saved enough to move into his own small apartment nearby. He visited every weekend, always bringing something, flowers, groceries, or just his company. One Sunday, he surprised me with something I never expected. A small framed photo, the one of us on his first bicycle. Only this time, he had restored it, cleaned it, placed it in a new golden frame. He handed it to me and said, For everything you held on to, even when I was falling. I smiled, holding back tears. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single moment. Maybe it was built, slowly, quietly, like a garden after a storm. But the story didn't end there. A month later, I got another letter, this time from the authorities. Rebecca had been caught overseas. Fraud, identity theft, outstanding warrants. She'd be facing years in prison. I felt nothing, no joy, no satisfaction, just a strange calm. Justice had finally done what I no longer needed to do. That night, Ethan and I sat on the porch again. He looked at me, then at the stars. She's paying for it now, he said. I nodded. We all pay for what we take eventually. He was quiet for a moment, then smiled faintly. You were right, Mom. Karma really does have a good memory. I laughed softly. It never forgets, dear. It just waits for the perfect time. As the crickets sang and the cool night breeze brushed past us, I looked at my son, the same boy I once feared I'd lost forever. He wasn't perfect, but he was mine, and he had found his way back home. Not just to my house, but to my heart. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about saying, I forgive you. It's about looking at someone who once broke you and realizing they don't have that power anymore. They've changed, and so have you. That's what peace really is. Not forgetting what happened, but living so fully afterward that the past loses its grip. And that night, sitting beside my son under the same stars that once witnessed my pain, I knew the nightmare was finally over. Not because I got revenge, but because I got closure. It's strange how life works. You spend years chasing peace, thinking it will come from having enough money, enough comfort, enough love. But real peace doesn't come from having. It comes from understanding. And that understanding usually costs more than anything you'll ever buy. It's been nearly a year since everything happened. Since my son betrayed me. Since his wife tried to ruin me. Since I decided to take control of my own life again. The days are quieter now. I wake up early, make tea instead of coffee, and sit by the kitchen window watching the sun rise through the garden Ethan planted. The flowers bloom in a rhythm that feels almost deliberate, patient, forgiving, alive. Sometimes I still think about Rebecca, about the woman who saw my generosity as weakness, who mistook kindness for foolishness. She's in prison now, and I heard through the grapevine that she's been trying to reach out. I don't reply. Some doors, once closed, must stay locked, not out of hate, but for peace. Forgiveness isn't about letting people back in. It's about letting yourself walk out. Ethan has changed more than I ever thought possible. He visits often, bringing groceries, sometimes just stories from his day. He laughs more now, that deep, honest laugh I thought I'd never hear again, and every time he leaves, he hugs me a little longer as if silently saying, "Thank you for not giving up on me." He told me once, "Mom, I think you saved me." But the truth is, he saved himself. I just stood still long enough for him to find his way back. Last week, he brought me a gift, a small wooden box he'd carved himself. When I opened it, I found an old photo inside. It was of me, younger, holding him as a baby. On the lid, he'd engraved the words, "For everything you gave, and everything you taught." I couldn't hold back the tears, not the kind that hurt, the kind that heal. People sometimes ask me if I regret anything, if I wish I'd handled it differently, if I'd been softer, or harsher, or quicker to forgive. The truth is, I don't regret a single thing, because sometimes losing control is what teaches you how to take it back. Sometimes breaking is what shows you what you're made of. I used to believe revenge was power, but I was wrong. Power isn't in revenge. It's in restraint. It's in watching someone who tried to destroy you realize that they never really could. Rebecca thought she could define me by what she took. Ethan thought he could buy happiness with what wasn't his. But both of them learned the same lesson. And so did I. Money fades. Love twists. But dignity endures. One evening, I sat on the porch with Ethan just like we used to. The air was cool, the sunset burning orange over the horizon. He said quietly, "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" I smiled, sometimes. But then again, if they had, we wouldn't be sitting here now. He nodded, thoughtful. "I think about her sometimes," he said softly. "I know," I replied. "You loved her once. That doesn't disappear overnight." He looked at me. "Do you think people like her can change?" I took a deep breath. "Everyone can change," I said. "But not everyone wants to. And you can't wait for someone who doesn't want to be saved." He nodded again, silent. Then he smiled faintly. "I think I finally understand what you meant all those years ago, when you said real wealth is peace of mind." I chuckled. "It only took you 30 years to learn it." He laughed too, wiping his eyes. "Better late than never." Later that night, after he'd gone home, I walked through the house, the same rooms that had once echoed with betrayal, now filled with quiet gratitude. I stopped at the old mirror in the hallway. For a moment, I just looked at myself. There were more lines on my face, more gray in my hair. But my eyes were sharper than ever. The eyes of a woman who had seen hell and refused to stay there. I thought back to that moment, the first betrayal, the sound of my son's voice saying, "Sweetheart, use Mom's card." That sentence had broken something inside me. But now, it made me smile, because that was the day I stopped being naive and started being free. The next morning, I went to the bank, the same one that once held the fake account, the same place that started this entire chain of events. The manager recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Ellis," he said warmly. "Good to see you again. How's everything?" "Better than ever," I replied. He smiled. "Still being cautious with your finances?" I laughed softly. "Always. But these days I invest in something more valuable." "Oh?" I nodded. "Peace." I withdrew a small amount in cash, not much. Just enough to remind myself that money was never the real problem. It was trust. And trust, once broken, could only be rebuilt with time and truth, not dollars. That evening, as I placed fresh flowers in the vase by the window, I caught my reflection again. Calm, older, wiser. The house was warm, the lights soft. Ethan's laughter echoed faintly from the phone as he called to say goodnight. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt it. Not revenge, not justice, but peace. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but they forget to mention it also makes you quieter, smarter. and infinitely harder to fool. I learned that lesson the hard way, and now, every time I look at my son, every time I see those flowers bloom, I whisper to myself, I survived the betrayal. I survived the lies. And in the end, I won. Not because I fought harder, but because I healed deeper. Because the greatest revenge isn't ruining someone's life. It's rebuilding yours. Better, brighter, and untouchable. And that's exactly what I did.